Good morning, y'all. This is your man, Carolyn, and welcome to Daddy's Right Here Live. I'm so thankful to have another day above ground. That in itself is a blessing. So, have you had an opportunity to check out my film? My first film, Words from the Fatherhood Chronicles. I've been running it since Friday for you to view, enjoy, ponder some thoughts about its content, and share with me some of your comments about what you saw in the film. It was my first film. You know, I had spent so much time giving annual symposiums, facilitating, co-facilitating fatherhood classes that I wanted to capture this stuff, man, because you know what? Excuse me. As a father, there were lots, and when you watch television, you see things in the media, you always see the negative side. You always see the raunchy side, the ratchet side of what happens between parents, you know, who have, in most cases, ended the romantic relationship and are having to make the transition back to the parental relationship. And that's one of the things that I often tell people, that you're going back to that position because you don't enter into it. In most cases, when the pregnancy happens, when a child is born, you're still focused on the romantic aspects of the relationship. Therefore, when it fails, the struggle really comes into play for becoming parents. That's where the greatest struggle is. So I've been showing all this weekend. I'm gonna have it up today, so you'll have all day to be able to check the film out. And I hope you enjoy it, man. It was quite an experience for me when I look at that film, that very first film, and I look at the content of my recent film, Why Are You My Ex 2? When I look at Why Are You My Ex, the first one, which is a 15-minute short film, I look at how I continue to learn, I continue to progress in this craft, and the end of this year, I'll be coming out with a fully animated film, Words from the Wise, the Boyhood Chronicles, because the Fatherhood Chronicles talks about the challenges that fathers have. The Boyhood Chronicles is going to talk about things that boys struggle with and have a difficulty with, not just in boyhood, but when coming into adulthood, when being in adulthood, the struggles, because boys are just treated so differently. And if nobody has grasped that concept yet, that boys are raised entirely different, then that's a greater part of the problem. It's a greater part of the problem. The great part of the problem is the fact that boys are treated differently, are raised and groomed differently. Recognizing it, acknowledging it, accepting it is another big part. That's the greater aspect of it. Because we go through hell as boys. And when we come into adulthood with that unresolved boyhood stuff, the stuff that we never had the chance to express, and on top of that, we have all of this anger and rage inside, and we want to get the boy out, but the boy seems to come out in adult situations, right? Which puts us in so many, situations of compromise. It's a terrible thing, and it's minimized. It is minimized. Yeah. So check the film out. Word from the Wise, The Fatherhood Chronicles. Look for more trailer hits on Word from the Wise, The Boyhood Chronicles. And yeah, I'm excited, man. I just can't say it enough that the film really took me back because there's footage in there of me from 2007. And in listening to the content of the film, it was just amazing what I had actually captured in terms of content. There's information that comes from the Quran. There's information that comes from the Bible. Matter of fact, I had an imam talk about fatherhood from Quranic perspectives, and I had a minister talk about family and fatherhood from the Bible's perspective. And I had a brother who had on that particular day, he had just not long ago got out of prison. I think he had been out of prison for about 22 months after spending like about 25 years of his life in prison. It was a very interesting event, and then to hear the fathers talk about their perspectives, who were part of the Fathers Club, which is a group that meets at the West Philadelphia Y on 52nd Street. I forget what night. It's been a while, but they meet every week, and I've been involved in the Fathers Club for some years. Some remain involved, and then some have moved on to other things. But then there's also professional interviews that I did. It was really great to see Brother Jerry Hawthorne, who has an organization by the name of Coffee. It's an acronym, COFFEE, and I can't remember what the acronym means, but old school, right? I learned a lot from him. I continue to learn a lot from him, from those gems that he had given me throughout the years. I haven't seen them, but those things remain with me that I learned from him. And it's always about learning. Again, one of the things, hey y'all, what's going on? Hey. All right, I don't have my glasses on, but how's everybody doing? Thank you everybody for tuning in on Instagram as well as YouTube. So for those of you who have seen my film, Why Are You My Ex 2, I talk about having sex at the age of 13 years old with an older woman. She was 21, 22 years old. I was 13. It was my first, I'll say, sexual experience with another person. And I'll just keep it right there. You take it to rest in your mind. But it was my first sexual encounter with another person. But it was a grown woman. A grown woman. And that kind of behavior of males is applauded. It's applauded. It's reinforced by certain dialogue. It's supported. It's something that it's like, yo, like, dude, what you waiting for? Go ahead and yeah. And nobody says anything about the predatory behavior of the woman. Nobody has that conversation. Nobody. It's overlooked. It's bypassed. What message does that send? It's okay for a woman to take advantage of a child, a male child. It's okay. It's okay for her to do that to a boy. But it's not okay for her to do that to a girl. I'm confused. And again, it just goes back to what I continue to talk about in terms of how boys are groomed, how boys are conditioned. And then the expectation of these ill-conditioned boys, right, is for them to act like they have some damn sense when they enter into a relationship, a romantic relationship. As adults, you can't poorly condition anyone, be it boy or girl, but you can't poorly condition them and then to have expectations of them, contrary to that conditioning. You can't. And this is what we continue to have happen in our society today in regards to how boys are raised. We applaud some of the poorest behavior. But then when it's played out, because it's played out in aggression, out predatorily, it's played out, it's played too. It's played out in so many ways, and then we're looking at like, what's wrong with him? When we start looking at sexual addictions, right? And we look at the behavior that comes along with addictions. We're not talking about just good old freaky ass sex now. I'm talking about addictive kind of stuff. I'm talking about stuff that is borderline criminal. Borderline too, but borderline criminal. Hurtful. Degrading. Forceful. See, this stuff happens not just because of one's psychological conditioning that may have been genetic or may have been brought on by some other events. I'm talking about conditioning. Conditioning. Becoming desensitized toward a person and more sensitized towards the release, the relief, the freedom of, the controlling of another person. So let's go to the article. There's an article on Psychology Today. The title of the article is Overexposed and Underprepared: The Effects of Early Exposure to Sexual Content. And this article is by Carolyn C. Ross, MD, M.P.H. We're just talking about content now. And when you and we're going to get a little further into it, because see, this is a heavy piece here, and this is something that continues to be totally ignored in our society. Totally ignored. This is talking about exposure to sexual content. When you look at music videos, especially in hip hop culture, but music videos all across the genres of music, all across the genres, different genres of music. But when you look at who's in the videos, when you look at what they're portraying in the videos, and you listen to the lyrics of the songs, everything is sexually driven. Everything. And I mentioned hip hop culture, but it's prevalent in R&B culture as well, because Teddy Pendergrass was singing about turn out the light, close the door a long time ago, before these folks was even thought about. We were singing about doing it in the park, doing it after dark. Come on, let's be real here. But everything is sexually driven. But in this day and age, it is more prevalent than anything else. Sexual content. So let's go to the article. And one of the things that it said under that title as well is the internet impacting sexual development? It was a question. And this post in Psychology Today was posted August 2012. Now, mind you, and that's why I'm bringing up the point, because this was 2012. We're at 2019. The question then with this article was, is the internet impacting sexual development? Okay, so let's go to the article. They grow up so fast. parents often lament. Today, children are being sexualized earlier and earlier, in part because they are exposed to sexual material in movies, television, music, and other media earlier than ever. With widespread access to the internet, curious teens may accidentally or intentionally be exposed to millions of pages of material that is uncensored, sexually explicit, often inaccurate, and potentially harmful. So what? If kids don't understand it, how can they be affected by it? Even if young children can't understand sex or its role in relationships, the images they see can leave a lasting impression. It's a basic premise of marketing that what we watch, read, and direct our attention toward influences our behavior. And as many marketer knows, sex sells. That's why we see products and services that have nothing to do with sex being marketed in increasingly sexualized ways. How many of y'all remember Billy D. Williams in the Colt 45 commercial? How many? Right? Billy standing there with an ice cold can of Colt 45, sis looking all sexy, got that leg up, right? All the implications. Colt 45 will get you this, fellas. Uh-huh. And ladies, you want a man who drinks Colt 45. But nobody told you about the effects of malt liquor and how when malt liquor comes into play, all hell breaks loose. I ain't tell you none of that, right? But it's sexualized. When we go to car shows, what do you see when you go to those car shows? Women, scantily dressed, right? I want you to think of all the things that you look at that have nothing to do with sex that are presented in a sexualized manner. Sex sells. Even some of those, like you, and I'm not going to put out names, but commercials for stores that are family stores, right? They're family stores. But look at what they're focusing on in the camera. You got a jeans commercial, for instance. What are they showing you? Huh? They ain't showing you some flat ass or something that they showing you a pair of jeans that are fitting the booty real good, right? So two things happen. Even if you ain't built like that, you believe that if you put them jeans on, you'll look like that. That's the first thing. The second thing is, even if the jeans are for women, men are sitting there looking like, damn, look at the booty on her. I need to get them for my girl. But damn, right? Again, it's a marketing strategy. Yo, my girl look good in them things too, but that ass there, woo! And you know, it's sexualized. And they got, girls all different ages and sizes, little girls. They got women on there, but the ones, but it's always the adult woman, right? Who's got the kids, and she got these fitting jeans on, and you be like, yeah. Oh, I mean, just think about it. See, as a person who makes films, right? I watch everything because I look at different techniques that I can use when I'm doing my films. I look at different things that are presented, so that I can take those ideas and I can, and not necessarily the ideas we were talking about, because I try to be focused more on content in terms of the dialogue more than what's presented. But I also know that, there are certain things that you wear, in film that make the film even more attractive. A nice tailored shirt, a nice fitting shirt, a nice hat, nice cap, so things that are appealing, things that are appealing, right? And this is what we're talking about in terms of content. So when you have, for instance, I've often talked to males about, like, when I was coming up, and I talk about in my film, Why Are You My Ex too, how, like, my mother had Jet magazines. My mother, she read women's magazines, Cosmopolitan. I don't know if Vanity Fair was one of them, but I know it was Cosmopolitan, Ebony, Jet. But the Centerfold, yo, that was like triple X code 5 porn for me. I turned to the Centerfold. I'm talking about as a child. I look at that Centerfold and be like, oh my God, she looks so beautiful. Now I'm a kid. And it speaks to that in this first paragraph. It says, well, okay, so children come upon this, if they come upon these kind of things, and so what? They don't understand it. So how can they be affected by it? Even if, and it says here, even if young children can't understand sex or its role in relationships, the images they see can have a lasting impression. A lasting impression. I didn't know anything about sex. So you have to understand the nature of our creation is in fact ingrained in sex. It's ingrained in sex. Adam and Eve had that desire towards one another. They didn't see it as dirty. They didn't see it as filthy. It was a natural thing, because if you and he are going to get together to make babies, to spring forth, right? Mankind, we definitely can't wait on you to decide if you want to or not. It was already determined. Y'all are going to get together to fornicate, to procreate. That's natural. So even though a child doesn't understand, right, anything other than the fact that that booty look good, that's enough. Because now I see that, and I'm looking for that in the little girls in my classroom. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. Little Mary, damn Mary, girl look good. And you go back to the Jet magazine, and then you see Mary again, and then you keep seeing Mary, and next thing you know, you done seen Shaniqua, and Shaniqua, she a little more developed. It's always the more developed ones that the boys gravitate toward, right? Come on now, let's put one and one together and stop getting three, and let's get two. Let's get two out of this. Because every time I looked at those magazines and I saw those girls, and then I was out in the street and I saw the other ones, she's got a bikini on, she's fully dressed, but damn if I don't see her in a bikini. I'm trying to tell you what begins to happen in the mind. In the mind. And we haven't even gotten into porn content. I'm just talking about everyday magazines, television, radio, the content. right? You start putting it all together and you start adding it all up. You start adding it all up. Back to the article. Children as young as 8 and 9 are coming across sexually explicit material on the internet and in other media. Although research is just beginning to assess the potential damage, there is reason to believe that early exposure to sexual content may have the following undesirable effects. I want you to follow me here. Okay? So we're going to go to the first one. The first one, early sex. Research has long established that teens who watch movies or listen to music that glamorizes drinking, drug use, or violence tend to engage in those behaviors themselves. A 2012 study shows that movies influences teens' sexual attitudes and behaviors as well. The study, published in Psychological Science, found that the more teens were exposed to sexual content in movies, the earlier they started having sex and the later they were to have casual, unprotected sex. Let me talk about that for a minute. Now, again, this goes back to research as well, because it says research has long established that teens who watch movies or listen to music that glamorizes drinking, drug use, or violence tend to engage in those behaviors. A 2012 study shows that movies influence teens' sexual attitudes and behaviors as well. Now, when you look at some of the shows, especially some of the reality, so-called reality, television shows, the ratchetness that goes on, right? The ratchetness that goes on. Some of them have children in the show, but how often do you sit and you watch those shows in the presence of your teens? So here you have a so-called reality show with ratchet behavior between men and women. You're trying to teach your child that that kind of behavior is not appropriate, yet it's being glamorized in a show, a television show. For one, it's on television. For two, you're watching it. And while the show is on, you're sitting and you're reacting towards the content. You're physically reacting. You're verbally reacting. And then if it's not you, just you and the child or children, the teens present, then you may have one of your girlfriends or some friends over and y'all sitting down and y'all talking about it. Or the discussion is had on the phone. Remember, 1 and 1 is going to always make 2. When you keep getting 1 and 1 and it's equal in 3, that's a great part of the problem, because that's what continues to happen. And what I mean by that is this: you know, right, to some degree what's happening. But denial is that other one. That's where the other one comes in, right? So truth and truth added up is just truth. But truth, and denial is where the confusion comes in. So see, when you're in denial about the content and how it's affecting you and or your children, that's a great problem, because you keep saying that that's not your life, that you ain't about that kind of life. But you're sitting there, for one thing, watching it, glamorizing it, and you're reacting to it. And based on your reactions, right, the child is internalizing it different, because remember, the child is not an adult. The child is not in your condition of thinking. The child is in the conditioning of the thinking of that age specifically. Again, going back to the article, they may not fully understand, but they hear, they see. And when they're faced with those circumstances, they begin to equate what they heard and saw in those situations with their situation, and that's how they deal with it. I hope I didn't lose you here. I hope I didn't lose you here. But many are already lost because they have not made the connection between what they say, what they do in front of the child, what the child sees and hears. And when that child comes upon that circumstance, they do exactly what it is that they saw and heard. And first thing you want to say is, well, where'd you learn that from? I learned it from you. Right? So I remember, listen, the first movie that I went to see with my mother took us to see Superfly. And Superfly was another one of them code 5 rated triple X films. In my mind, not in my mother's mind. And I'm not saying anything negative about my mother. I'm just simply saying this is a movie that she took us to see. Right? I forget how old we were. And I don't want to date myself either, although I'm proud of my age. But for me, at that age where I was in my sexuality, going to see Superfly was just like going to see a straight porn. For real. It was like a straight porn movie. That's all I was looking for. I was looking at how the males were dressed. And in the 70s, right, the 70s and early 80s, right, men, right, were more sexualized themselves, where, you know, it was like the shirts, you know, open down the head, the fitting pants and everything. Then we got away from that to like hanging our pants off our behind and just showing boxes and that kind of stuff like that. We've got away from sexy, but that's a whole different show I'm gonna do on male sexy, right? But just in, I'm looking at all those messages. I'm looking at the swagger. Because remember, I'm young. I'm coming into that age. I'm coming into that age. I'm coming into myself, and I'm looking at the things that were, you know, glamorized. You know, you walk this way, you talk that way. You know, you have this and you have that, and you know, you do this and you do that, and this is what you get when you do these kind of things. But then when I saw the women with the, you know, I can just see a little pinch of cleavage and know what's down there and get excited as a child. And then how do you think that presents in my life as I go through life? Yeah, I know that's my aunt. I know that's my cousin. I know they family. But that's not here. What's here is the images. The images of that. Oh, man, you know what I'm saying? You like, I know my cousin, but you don't, you know, you don't say that as a child. You hear cousin, but you haven't made the connection between, yeah, that's your cousin. That's family. Yeah, okay, I got that. But did you see the booty? Right? She got them things that's bouncing all over the place, and I'm gonna press up on that thing. Right? Come on, we have that. That happens today in adult life. We got some fine ass cousins, right? You'd be like, boy, girl, right? But I'm saying this to say a child doesn't understand cousin other than, yeah, that's family. A child really doesn't understand family other than we related. You got to understand these words that we expect for children to understand. They're not understanding from our perspective. We're adults, and we don't understand that. They don't understand what family means. There's some of us as adults now who still don't understand what family means. Right? Back to the article. In another study, boys who were exposed to sexually explicit media were 3 times more likely to engage in oral sex and intercourse 2 years after exposure than non-exposed boys. Let me stop there for a second. Do you understand what I just said? Boys who were exposed to sexually explicit media were 3 times more likely to engage in oral sex and intercourse 2 years after exposure. Now, I don't know what the timeline was for me, right? But I do know that the material that I was looking at, because sexually explicit, and again, I say to you, an advertisement in a magazine for bras and panties was sexually explicit to me as a child. This is what we have to understand, folks. We have to understand that. The material in the media comes to life when I'm around your little girl. Understand what I'm saying? And, so on for a little girl when she sees a little boy. But for me as a male, as a boy, I'm looking at pictures in the magazine. I'm seeing your little Mary that you're sending to school, all dressed up in her nice form-fitting clothes. And I'm all up on her. Why am I all up on her? Because of the nature that already exists within me and her too. Don't count girls out. The nature exists within both, but there's a conditioning that happens to both. Girls have more value of that that lies between their legs. You can touch the booty, you can squeeze the titty, but you ain't getting no yang yang. Right? All boys got is the yang yang. They ain't got nothing else. But what I'm saying is that when you look at sexually explicit media, right, with something just as basic as a bra and panty commercial, a picture, centerfolds, man, I'd be taking them centerfolds out, just like take the books and just open them all up to the centerfold and lay them on the bed and just look at them, right? Because I told you before having sex with someone else, right? A real person, and I left the rest to your own imagination, right? Again, and then you start going into your child's room and you start finding these magazines, and I was just reading the article. Because it's not a sexually explicit magazine. So you don't see nothing wrong with it. Why you have my magazine in here? I mean, that's about the only thing you would say as an adult. Like, this is my magazine. You won't think in your mind that this magazine, this Jet magazine, has anything harmful. But then the dots are being connected. What I see you do in front of me. What I take peeps at. While you in your room. When you with your man. When you with your woman. Because women do things in front of their children. Or let me say this. Many women tend to do things in front of their children that are more romantic in nature. Men are just outright raunchy when they do things in front of their children. Like, a man to be kissing his woman and grab that ass and the children sitting right there. Like, whoo, that ass. When a woman, stop the kids there. You understand what I'm saying to you? Right? But you got to look at the whole thing. Like when he walk up behind you, you washing dishes, and he put arms around you and gently kisses you on your neck, and you wiggle the booty. They looking for that kind of stuff. See, this is where the connection starts being made, because they're looking for the action. They're looking for what comes with that. It ain't just a kiss, because again, it says here that it's more oral sex and sexual intercourse that takes place. The kissing and whatnot, the whole kissing thing is not even something that you see in film. It's not even, that's not connected with sex. What's connected with sex are the genitals. That's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the booty and the breasts and the crotch. I'm not looking at her arms, her eyes. I couldn't give a shit about them. That's not what I'm looking at, right? And you have to understand these things. So when the child gets to sexually explicit material, that's a whole different ball game. That's a whole different ball game. To see a woman stretched out, spread, the image that places in your mind. And I can't go back to that point in my life when I first saw those things, but I can tell you, as an adult male, how those things played out in my life in relationships with girls, with women. I can tell you those things. I can tell you those things. But I ain't going to tell you those things in detail. Ain't none of your business. I just want you to begin to understand what you leave around your children, what you allow your children to watch, what you allow your children to listen to. The things that you think that you should be separating from them, you don't separate from them. The things that you leave before them, you don't think that there's any content that's relevant to their sexuality, because you continue to avoid the conversation about sex because you don't think they're ready. But they're ready, just like you were ready in some capacity. Some are ready to engage in the actual act. Some just want to see. Some just want to get the giggles to say they saw, but ain't ready to do nothing. Some are just ready to, I need to feel that. Right? But it talks about, and I talked about this in my previous films about the exploratory stages of children, and how males have this thing that protrudes from them, and it goes up and down and up and down, and then stuff leaks out of it sometimes, and then when you touch it and you get this feeling, and then you pull it and you get another feeling, and it's right there all the time, so you do it more frequently, and it's, and girls, they touch too, but boys just have this experience of, I woke up and this thing was standing up. And then I felt relief in very means, which we won't go into because it's not the show today. But back to the article. Why are teens more likely to have sex after being exposed to sexual content in the media? Just as we read specific books and show education to our children in hopes that they learn lessons from the characters, the media provides a type of sex education to young people. Media messages normalize early sexual experimentation and portray sex as casual, unprotected, and consequence-free, encouraging sexual activity long before children are emotionally, socially, or intellectually ready. Having sex at an early age alters the natural order of your development as a human being. The natural order. It causes you to divert attention from your purpose. You dig what I'm saying? See, what happens is when that spark happens between the sperm and the egg, when that happens, that's it. And when those two come together, it's like, even though it forms, when they come together, that's what it's like. It's like, there's the miracle. And in that miracle is an individual. There's none other like it. There's none other like it. It's a purpose for that being. Anything that happens while in the womb and outside of the womb is influencing the individual. Everything that happens along the way influences the individual. You understand what I'm saying to you? So when other things happen, the individual has to latch on to something that brings it relief, brings resolve to what just happened. Right? It's just like if somebody asks you a question, you give an answer, right? So using that analogy, when something happens, so if I wake up and it's standing up, that is something that's happening. I need to bring resolve to it. I need to do something with it. What do I do with it? So when I see dad in the chair chilling and he got his hand in his pants and he's doing like this, what is dad doing? Does he have crabs? Does it hurt? What is he doing? Huh? What is he doing? Right? So I put my hand down there and I begin to do what I seen dad doing. And in the moment, I realize, Dad, I think you're onto something there. You got me? And that's how it begins to happen, man. It begins to happen just like that. Right? Now that's just something that I saw. It wasn't a sexual act, but it was sexual in nature. You dig? It was sexual in nature. It was sexual in nature. So when you look at like the animated shows that come on, right? I'm not gonna name them, but you know them, they're cartoons. They're animated. And they have adult content. These shows are not for children. You think because it's a cartoon, it's for children. And you're sitting there watching, and all of a sudden you be like, dope. Need I say more? Right? But you got the kids sitting there watching. And you're listening to some of the things that are being said by kids, by adults. You laugh about it. It's humorous. It's conditioning me to believe the same. You understand what I'm saying to you? So be aware of all media. All media has sexual content. All media has sexual content within it. You just have to understand where your child is in their sexuality. What does that mean? That means that you need to start having conversations, not judgmental conversations. You need to start finding out where your child is sexually and asking them, are they having sex yet? Is not the damn question, because you're going to always get no. You're going to always get no. No, I'm not having sex. Good to find out what they calling it these days. Oral sex, for many in different groups is not considered sex, even though sex is the second part of the statement. It's not considered a sexual act. It's not. Some even believe that it's not even an act of infidelity. Yeah. Do your research. So oral sex becomes like, it's cool. I can't get pregnant with oral sex. I can't get you pregnant with oral sex. And there are many doing it. They're doing it as theirs. I didn't say they were doing it right. I just said he was doing it. And again, because being exposed to something that you see and then doing something, well, you still don't fully understand what it is you're doing when you're a child engaged in that behavior. Because you can't project, you can't see what we as adults see. And there are some adults who are still absent in mind of understanding. But I'm just saying to you that you have to begin to look at all of these things, because what you understand something to be, you didn't understand it to be the same as a child. You didn't. Just because you can remember some events that took place, the mental conditioning, the psyche, you can't recapture that. You can't. Unless it was a traumatic event. Unless it was a traumatic event. And you have to understand what trauma is. Or it was one of those favorable, memorable events. Like I can remember the first time I rode a bike. It stays within my mind. There was an emotion attached to that. My uncle was pushing me, and after several falls, he pushed me on the bike. He let me go. I thought he was still with me. And here I came down the block. There was the corner. I hit the corner. He said it was over after that. I was gone. Because once I learned how to turn that corner, that was it. Right? Because I couldn't turn the corner. It's like going straight was easy. But when I learned how to turn that corner, I started turning all of them. And I was riding around the block, turning corners. I can remember that. I can remember that. But it's some painful events that, because the body protects itself, it becomes suppressed in the mind. And it only shows up when I'm faced with certain circumstances. So when we look at the impact of sexual behavior early on, right, you begin to see things in a different lens. You begin to see things in a different lens. And right now, we're only talking about content. We're just talking about content. I haven't even gotten to the act itself yet. Haven't even gotten to the act itself. I am going to stop there before going into the next paragraph, because we're pretty close to the hour. But there are a lot of things that we have to. We have to start looking at in terms of what's happening with our children's sexuality. There was. I was watching the news the other day, and they were talking about how sex amongst teens continues to decrease. Now, I don't know where these studies come from. Not just that one, but so many damn studies. I'm 58 years old. Ain't nobody ever asked me a damn question about some damn study they keep talking about all these people participating in, right? But I can tell you this: if you live in any environment, right, that is stressful. I don't care if it's a poor and impoverished community or a very affluent community. When you are in stressful circumstances, sex can always be a reliever of stress, period. But more importantly, the higher the stress level in and around your environment, right, brings forth more sexual activity. It does. It's sex, drugs, and violence. These are all cousins. These are all cousins of societal strangulation, oppressed environments. These are the cousins of that. Sex, drugs, and violence. Yeah. That's what those kind of environments break out to. Those environments that are societally strangled, oppressed. That's what the result is. And then you start having all of these children, right? Because I believe in, I don't believe in abortion. I don't believe in the condom. Or I just don't know, because again, it said it in the article, right? Those things aren't showing on TV. How many damn porn movies have you seen with somebody putting on a damn condom? You may see it on, right? Depending on what you're watching. But how many commercials about putting on a condom? For real. That's pointless. I'm not trying to sell safe sex. I'm trying to sell sex. And it's not shown. So children don't understand how being with this person and that person and this person and that person, how it will later affect your life down the line. Because you can come away from a casual interaction and you'll have something for the rest of your damn life. And there's a lot of children who get a lot of sexually transmitted diseases, especially something like chlamydia, because of the practices that they have. Because they don't understand that. It just feels good. And they don't understand the connection between my spiritual conditioning, my life. This is fun. It's a reliever. It's something that we really need to continue to look at, which we will do next week. As always, I thank all of you for tuning in on Instagram, YouTube. For those of you who watch video footage on my Carolyn educational station, because you can't always watch the live viewing. You can be doing anything else on a Sunday morning at 9 o'clock than sitting here listening to my mouth. As always, thank you. Enjoy your day. I know y'all chilly up in Philly, but here in the wonderful state of Florida, we're expecting about 80-degree weather. I'm going to go vacuum out my car. I washed it last night. I might even go hit the beach for a minute. Yo, peace. Let's go Rams.